Let's discuss the effects of the Federal Reserve changing the interest rates and why they would want to do that. Now, the Federal Reserve, as we said before, has two goals. Those two goals is to get to full employment and price stability. But these two goals are in conflict with each other. If everyone had a job, if you really had full employment where everybody can get a job, workers could demand really high wages. And high wages would then cause really high prices. And as the prices go up, the workers demanding high wages would be like, hey, our wages aren't worth as much anymore. Give us a pay raise. So you're going to demand higher wages, which can cause prices to go up. And you have this cycle. And well, that is inflation, right? Wages and prices going up is inflation. So if you have complete full employment, you're going to have really high inflation. So the Federal Reserve was given the freedom to define those terms the way they wanted to. And so the Federal Reserve defines price stability as 2% inflation. And the full employment is essentially the amount of employment consistent with that inflation target. They think of full employment as being 4% employment level, and they think that that's the full employment inflation level because they think that's the amount of employment that over a long period of time would keep inflation stable at 2%. So why to hit those two targets, what is the effects of changing the interest rates? So think of if inflation is too high, right? That means there's too much money following too few goods. People are trying to buy too many things. So we got to decrease how much people are buying things to bring the prices of things down or to at least stop the prices from going up so quickly. So the Federal Reserve will raise the interest rates. And if inflation is too high, they will raise the interest rates. This rises cost of getting a mortgage, a loan for a new car, or if you're a business, it would cost more to borrow money to invest in a new factory, right? And so this raises the cost of buying a new home or buying a new car. So people buy less buy less homes, buy less cars, right? So that means less construction workers having jobs, less automotive workers having jobs. The people that would have worked in that factory don't have jobs, right? So as people do less of these things, they buy less houses, buy less cars, right? That's decreasing aggregate demand. So that means that there's going to be more unemployment, less people hired, and hence less inflation. Prices won't be rising as quickly. So raising the interest rate decreases the inflation rate. Now, on the other hand, if unemployment is too high, the Federal Reserve will lower the interest rates, right? It's the exact opposite story, right? Lowering the interest rate, that means the cost of a mortgage goes down. So it's cheaper to buy a house. More people will buy a house. The cost of buying a car will go down. I bought a lovely plug-in hybrid minivan a couple years ago. And a key reason why I did that is because the interest rate we could get for that minivan was zero, right? And so that was a great deal. And it made us more likely to buy that car, right? And lowering the interest rates will lower the cost of borrowing to create a new factory, right? So more companies will create factories. So as people do more of these things, they buy more houses, buy more cars, they invest in more factories, so on, that's going to cause higher aggregate demand. That's going to decrease the amount of unemployment. And as unemployment goes down, on the other hand, it's going to be causing inflation to go up. So we have this trade-off between unemployment and inflation. And the Federal Reserve is trying to balance those two things. Keep in mind that the balance of what is the ideal amount of unemployment versus what is the proper amount of inflation, these are very political goals, right? That really changes the distribution of incomes. For most workers, decreasing the unemployment rate would be incredibly important. And it's actually for most Americans, and an increase in the inflation rate would actually make them better off. I have tons of loans out, right? I have six figures in student loans from getting my PhDs. I have a mortgage on my house. I have, the money I borrowed for the car, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans. If there's more inflation, that means prices of everything goes up. My salary goes up. And so when I pay off those loans in the future, when you think of how much stuff if I am I giving up when I pay those loans in the future, with more inflation, I'm giving up less stuff when I pay that loan off in the future. Or if you think of it in terms of, right, my salary would go up with inflation. So if you think what percentage of my salary is going to pay off those loans, it would go down, right, as inflation gets higher. So a higher inflation rate would really help me. It'd probably help most of you if in the coming years because you're probably going to have a lot of student loans. For most Americans who are in debt, higher inflation would help them out, right? There's a lot of debate right now about reducing student loans. One easy way we could do that would just to be to have more inflation, right? So this decision, should we increase unemployment to decrease inflation, right? It's a very political decision. It really affects the distribution of income in the United States. And it's, fascinating that we have created a system that is free from political control, right? That the people deciding it are not elected. There's actually reason for why we do this. There's a fear that if the people we gave control of monetary policy, um, if we elected them, that to please the voters, they'll do what's, in the immediate interest of the majority of the people, low unemployment, higher inflation. And they would do that to such an extent that inflation would get out of control. And so to prevent creating this dynamic that lets inflation get out of control, we've created a system that is intended to really focus on fighting inflation. And we've taken it out of political debate. We hear much more debate about politicians and the president than we do the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve has much more impact on the economy than the politicians do, right? And we've taken that away. And to some extent, that's because of the different class interest over these decisions.